Lieutenant Jae-woo Park was having the worst day of his trading career. The interdimensional trade station buzzed with activity around him, but his booth remained empty while other human merchants made deals left and right. His cargo of Earth spices and entertainment devices sat untouched as alien. Buyers walked past without even a glance. The massive space station orbited between 3 different star systems, making it the perfect meeting point for dozens of species. Crystalline beings from the Helix. Nebula clicked and chimed as they examined human art. 6-armed traders from the outer rim haggled over prices in broken universal standard. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert thousands of different languages. Jae-woo leaned back in his chair and watched the crowd. At 28, he was one of the younger members of the Terran Deep Space Fleet Trading Division. His dark hair was regulation short, and his uniform bore the patches of someone who had served on 3 different vessels. He prided himself on being good with people, able to charm his way into almost any deal. Today, however, his usual confidence was failing him. That was when he noticed the pale figure watching him from across the busy corridor. The being looked almost human, but something about him made Jae-woo's instincts prickle with warning. He was tall and thin, with skin so white it seemed to glow under the station's artificial lights. His black hair fell in waves to his shoulders, and when he moved, it was with a grace that seemed too smooth, too perfect. But it was his eyes that really caught attention. They were dark, almost black, and they never seemed to blink. The stranger had been standing there for over an hour, just watching. Not just Jae-woo's booth, but Jae-woo himself. Other traders had noticed too. Conversations grew quieter when people looked in that direction. Even the usually fearless Centaurian merchants gave the pale figure a wide berth. Jae-woo had dealt with intimidating aliens before. During his first year of trading, he had learned that showing fear was the fastest way to lose both respect and profit. But this was different. This being radiated something that made even veteran spacers uncomfortable. The stranger finally began. Walking toward Jae-woo's booth, his movement was silent despite the metal flooring, and he seemed to glide rather than walk. As he got closer, Jae-woo could see that his features were sharp and elegant, like something carved from marble. His clothes were simple but expensive, made from materials that shifted color in the light. "You are human," the stranger said when he reached the booth. His voice was soft, but carried easily over the noise of the station. He spoke Universal Standard perfectly, but with an accent Jae-woo could not place. "That's right," Jae-woo replied, forcing his voice to stay steady. "Lieutenant Jae-woo Park, Terran Deep Space Fleet. Are you interested in any of our products?" Stranger's lips curved into what might have been a smile, but it did not reach his eyes. "I am Hyanzik. My people are called the Nixhari. We do not often encounter humans in this sector." Jae-woo had never heard of the Nixhari, which was unusual. His training had covered most of the known species in this part of the galaxy. "We're expanding our trade routes, always looking for new business partners." Hyanzik stepped closer to the booth, and Jae-woo caught a strange scent, like old leather and something metallic. "Business partners," Hyanzik repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "Yes, humans are known for their business." There was something mocking in his tone that made Jae-woo bristle. I'd heard that attitude before from species that considered humans primitive or insignificant. It always brought out his stubborn streak. An idea began forming in Jae-woo's mind. If this Hyanzik wanted to look down on humans, maybe it was time to show him that humans could be just as unsettling as any alien. Jae-woo was known among his crewmates for his ability to charm his way out of trouble. He had flirted his way past customs officials, sweet-talked angry station commanders, and once even convinced a Regellian pirate to let his ship go with nothing but smooth words and a winning smile. This pale, intimidating alien thought he could make humans uncomfortable. Time to turn the tables. Jae-woo leaned forward and flashed his most dazzling smile. The one that had worked on everyone from admirals' daughters to alien diplomats. "You know, Hyanzik, you have the most incredible eyes. They're like looking into deep space itself." For the first time since approaching the booth, Hyanzik seemed surprised. His perfect composure wavered slightly, and those dark eyes widened just a fraction. Encouraged, Jay-Woo continued. And that skin of yours? It's amazing. Like you're made of starlight. Do all your people look so elegant, or are you just naturally gifted? A faint color appeared on Hyacinth's pale cheeks. Around them, other traders had stopped their conversations to watch this strange interaction. Human was openly flirting with one of the most intimidating beings anyone had seen on the station. You are very forward, Hyacinth said, his voice quieter than before. I prefer honest, Jay-Woo replied smoothly. He stood up from his chair and leaned casually against his booth's counter, striking a pose he knew showed off his best features. Life's too short to waste time being subtle, don't you think? Though I suppose someone like you might have a different perspective on time. Hyacinth's breathing seemed to have quickened slightly. His fingers, which Jay-Woo now noticed were longer and more delicate than human fingers, gripped the edge of the booth's counter. You do not know what you are doing, Hyacinth whispered. But there was something hungry in his voice. Jay-Woo interpreted this as embarrassment and pressed his advantage. Maybe not, but I know what I see. And what I see is someone fascinating who's been watching me for the past hour. If you're interested in more than just business, we could grab drinks sometime. I know a great place on level 7 that serves everything from Terran coffee to Andromeda nectar. The effect of these words on Hyacinth was immediate and dramatic. His eyes flashed bright red for just a moment before returning to their normal dark color. Watch. He straightened to his full height, which put him several inches taller than Jay-Woo, and spoke a single word in a language that sounded like music and winter wind combined. The words seemed to hang in the air between them, and Jay-Woo felt a strange tingling sensation run through his body. For a moment, the noise of the station faded, and all he could hear was his own heartbeat and Hyacinth's soft breathing. Then the moment passed. Hyacinth stepped back from the booth, his composure fully restored. I must go, he said formally. Thank you for your time, Lieutenant Park. He turned and walked away with that same silent grace. Disappearing into the crowd before Jay-Woo could respond, Jay-Woo stood there for a moment, feeling oddly disappointed. He had expected the flirtation to continue, maybe even lead to an actual drink and conversation. Instead, he was left with the feeling that something important had just happened. But he had no idea what. The other traders slowly returned to their business, casting curious glances at Jay-Woo. A Centaurian merchant at the next booth clicked, his mandibles in what might have been amusement. That was either very brave or very stupid. Human, the Centaurian said, an accented universal standard. Probably stupid, Jay-Woo admitted, sitting back down. But at least it was interesting. He spent the rest of the day trying to focus on his trading, but his mind kept drifting back to Hyacinth. Those dark eyes, that strange red flash, and especially that word he had spoken in his native language. There had been something almost ritualistic about the way he had said it. When the station's artificial night cycle began, Jay-Woo packed up his unsold goods and headed back to his quarters on the human merchant vessel. He felt tired in a way that seemed to go deeper than just a long day of unsuccessful trading. As he prepared for sleep, Jay-Woo found himself touching his neck absently. The skin there felt sensitive, almost itchy. He assumed it was just stress from the difficult day and dismissed it. He fell asleep easily. But his dreams were filled with dark eyes and whispered words in unknown languages. Somewhere in the depths of sleep, he thought he felt cool fingers brushing against his neck. But when he stirred, there was nothing there. The morning would bring revelations that would change everything. Jay-Woo thought he knew about flirtation, aliens, and the consequences of playing with forces beyond human understanding. Jay-Woo woke up feeling like he had been hit by a cargo hauler. His head pounded with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat, and his mouth felt dry as desert sand. Sunlight from the station's artificial day cycles streamed through his small quarters window, making him squint and cover his eyes with his hand. Something was wrong, very wrong. He sat up slowly, his body protesting every movement. The reflection in his small mirror showed a face that looked pale and tired. Dark circles ringed his eyes, and his usually neat hair stuck up in odd directions. But it was his neck that made him freeze in shock. 2 small marks sat just below his jawline. They looked like puncture wounds, perfectly round and deep enough to have drawn blood. The skin around them was slightly bruised and tender to the touch. Jae-woo stared at his reflection, trying to remember how he could have gotten injured. His dreams came flooding back, cool fingers on his skin, dark eyes watching him, a voice whispering words he could not understand. But they had been dreams. Nothing more? Had he somehow hurt himself while sleeping? A sharp knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Jae-woo, you missed morning briefing," came the voice of Corporal Yoon-ji Kim, his best friend and crewmate. "Captain Lee wants to see you in 10 minutes. Jae-woo tried to answer, but his voice came out as a croak. He cleared his throat and tried. Again, "Give me 5 minutes to get ready." "Are you sick?" Yeon-jae asked through the door. Her voice carried the concern of someone who had known him for 3 years. "You sound terrible." "Just tired," Jae-woo lied, pulling on his uniform as quickly as his shaking hands would allow. The fabric felt rough against his sensitive skin, and the collar rubbed against the marks on his neck in a way that made him wince. When he opened the door, Young-ji took one look at him and frowned. She was a small woman with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, as always, and her expression showed the kind of worry that came from genuine friendship. "You look awful," she said bluntly. "When was the last time you ate something?" Jae-woo tried to remember. Had he eaten dinner the night before? The memory felt fuzzy, like trying to recall a dream. "I'm not hungry," he said, which was true. Thought of food made his stomach turn. They walked through the ship's corridors toward the captain's quarters. Other crew members nodded greetings as they passed, but Jae-woo barely noticed them. His attention kept drifting, and he found himself looking toward the docking bay without knowing why. "Earth to Jae-woo," Yoon-ji said, snapping her fingers in front of his face. "You just walked past the captain's door." He blinked and realized she was right. They had to backtrack several steps to reach Captain Lee's office. The door slid open to reveal a woman in her 40s with graying hair and the kind of steady gaze that came from years of command. "Lieutenant Park," Captain Lee said, looking up from her datapad. "I trust your trading went well yesterday." "Exactly, ma'am," Jae-woo replied, trying to focus on her words. Something was pulling at his attention, like a voice calling his name from far away. Sales were slow. Captain Lee studied his face with growing concern. "Are you feeling well, Lieutenant? You look pale?" Before Jae-woo could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The emergency lights flashed red, and the captain's communication system crackled to life. "Captain Lee, to the bridge immediately," came the urgent voice of the duty officer. "We have an unidentified vessel requesting permission to dock. They're asking specifically for Lieutenant Park." The captain's eyes narrowed. "Asking for you by name?" she said to Jae-woo. "Did you make any unusual contacts yesterday?" Jae-woo's heart began racing, and not from fear. The pulling sensation in his chest had grown stronger, almost painful in its intensity. He needed to get to that docking bay. He needed to find him. There was someone, Jae-woo said, his voice sounding distant even to his own ears. A trader named Hyeon-sik. From a species called the Nixhari, Captain Lee and Yoon-ji exchanged glances. "Never heard of them," the captain said, "and I've been trading in this sector for 15 years. The communication system crackled again. "Captain, they're not taking no for an answer. Their ship is unlike anything in our databases. It's beautiful, but unsettling." Jae-woo was barely listening. The need to reach the docking bay had become overwhelming. His hands were shaken, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the ship's comfortable temperature. "I need to go," he said, taking a step toward the door. "Go where?" Yoon-ji asked, grabbing his arm. Her touch felt burning hot against his cold skin. "Jae-woo, what's wrong with you?" "I have to see him," Jae-woo said, pulling away from her grip. "He's waiting for me." Captain Lee stood up quickly. "Lieutenant, you're not going anywhere until we figure out what's happening here. Security to my quarters, immediately." Jae-woo was already moving. The compulsion had become too strong to resist. He pushed past Young-ji and ran from the captain's office, ignoring their shouts behind him. His feet carried him through the ship's corridors without conscious thought. Following a path that felt carved into his very bones, the docking bay was bustling with activity. Crew members were securing cargo and performing routine maintenance on the smaller trading vessels. But all work had stopped, as everyone stared at the ship that had just docked at Port 7. It was like nothing Jae-woo had ever seen. The hull was black as deep space, but seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols glowed along its sides in colors that hurt to look at directly. The ship made no sound, but the air around it felt thick and heavy. Standing at the airlock was Hyansik. He looked exactly as he had the day before, pale and elegant and perfectly still. But now, Jae-woo could see things he had missed. The way Hyansik's chest barely moved with breathing. The way his eyes tracked movement with predatory focus. The way other people unconsciously stepped away from him. Their eyes met across the busy docking bay, and Jae-woo felt something click into place in his mind. The pulling sensation stopped, placed by a sense of completion that was both wonderful and terrifying. Hyansik smiled, showing teeth that were just slightly too sharp to be human. "You came," Hyansik said as Jae-woo approached. His voice carried easily over the noise of the docking bay. "I was not certain the bond would be strong enough so soon." "Bond?" Jae-woo asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "What did you do to me?" "I did nothing," Hyansik replied. "You offered yourself freely. The words you spoke, the invitation you gave, they triggered something that cannot be undone." Behind Jae-woo, he could hear running footsteps as security officers and his crewmates arrived. Yoonji was shouting his name, and Captain Lee was demanding explanations. But their voices seemed to come from very far away. "I don't understand," Jae-woo said, though his body was already moving closer to Hyansik without his permission. "You will," Hyansik said gently. "But first you must meet my family. They are ... eager to discuss our situation." From the darkness of the alien ship's airlock, other figures began to emerge. They moved with the same silent grace as Hyansik. Their pale faces showed expressions that ranged from curiosity to anger. The first to step forward was a young woman who looked like a female version of Hyansik. Her black hair was longer, and her dark eyes burned with fury. When she spoke, her voice carried an accent similar to Hyansik's, but sharper, more dangerous.
Brother,"
she said, and though she spoke universal standard, she managed to make the words sound like a curse. "Explain to me why you have bound yourself to this primitive creature without consulting the family." Hyansik's jaw tightened. "Yuna, you will speak respectfully of my mate." The word mate hit Jae-woo like a physical blow. The docking bay seemed to spin around him, and he had to grab onto a nearby railing to keep from falling. "Mate?"
"Yoonji's."
The voice came from behind him, high with shock and disbelief. "Jae-woo, what is he talking about?" But Jae-woo could not answer. The reality of his situation was finally sinking in. His casual flirtation, his attempt to embarrass an intimidating alien, had somehow resulted in something that these beings considered marriage. Yuna stepped closer, and Jae-woo could see that her teeth were definitely fangs. "This thing lives barely a century," she said to Hyansik, "but has no understanding of our ways, no appreciation for the honor you have given it. And yet you bound yourself to it like some lovesick child." "Bond was mutual," Hyansik said firmly. "He offered himself freely, and I accepted. It is done. Can be undone," Yuna replied coldly. "Father will demand it when he learns what you have done." Jae-woo found his voice at last. "Someone needs to explain to me what's happening here. Right now." Hyansik turned to face him fully, and for the first time, his expression showed something like regret. "Yesterday, when you spoke to me as you did, offered what you offered, you triggered something ancient in my people. A bonding ritual that links the souls together permanently. Permanently, Captain." Lee's voice came from the crowd of humans that had gathered. "You're talking about some kind of mystical marriage?" "More than marriage," Yuna said with disgust. "A true bond of soul and blood can only be broken by death." The docking bay fell silent, except for the hum of the station's air recyclers. Jae-woo stared at Hyansik, trying to process what he was hearing. "So when I was flirting with you," Jae-woo said slowly, "I was actually proposing Hyun." Captain Somin Lee had faced pirates, hostile aliens, and even a black hole once. But nothing had prepared her for the diplomatic nightmare unfolding in her docking bay. 3 more Nixhari ships had arrived in the past hour, each one darker and more intimidating than the last. The largest vessel was the size of a battle cruiser, its black hull covered in symbols that seemed to move when no one was looking directly at them. The ship's sensors showed energy readings unlike anything in Terran databases. Whatever technology the Nixhari possessed, it made human ships look like toys in comparison. "Captain, communications officer," Taman called from his station on the bridge. "We're receiving a priority message from Earth Command. I want a full report on the situation. Tell them they'll get one when I figure out what the situation actually is." Captain Lee replied, watching the view screen that showed the alien vessels surrounding her trading ship. "Any word from the other human vessels in the area, A3? "Merchant ships have already jumped to hyperspace," Taman reported, "but the military patrol vessel Defender is requesting permission to dock. Captain Wu Jin says he has orders to assist if needed." Captain Lee nodded. At least she would not be facing this alone. The Defender was small but well-armed, and Captain Wu Jin was an old friend from her academy days. Down in the docking bay, the tension was growing thicker by the minute. More Nixhari had emerged from their ships, and they stood in perfect formation behind their leaders. They were all pale and elegant, but there were differences. Some looked young, while others seemed ancient. All of them moved with that same unsettling grace, and all of them watched the humans with expressions that ranged from curiosity to barely concealed hunger. Jae-woo stood between the two groups, still feeling the strange pull of the bond, but now understanding how much trouble he was in. The marks on his neck throbbed with each heartbeat, and he could sense Hyeon-seek's emotions mixing with his own. Fear, anticipation, and something that might have been protectiveness. Young-ji stayed close to his side, her hand resting on her sidearm. She had seen enough combat to recognize a dangerous situation, and everything about the Nixhari screamed predator. "This is insane," she whispered to Jae-woo. "We need to get you out of here before this gets worse." "I don't think I can leave," Jae-woo whispered back. The truth was, even thinking about moving away from Hyeon-seek caused physical pain. The bond was like a chain he could not see, but definitely felt. The airlock of the largest Nixhari ship opened. With a sound like distant thunder, the figure that emerged made everyone else look ordinary by comparison. He was tall, even for his species, with silver hair that fell to his waist and eyes that seemed to hold the light of dying stars. His presence filled the docking bay like a physical force, making the air itself feel heavy. Hyeon-seek and Yuna immediately dropped to one knee. The other Nixhari followed their example, leaving the humans standing awkwardly as the only ones not bowing. Elder Moonho, Hyeon-seek said, his voice filled with respect and fear. "I did not expect you to come personally, ancient beings." Gaze swept over the assembled humans before settling on Jae-woo. When their eyes met, Jae-woo felt like he was staring into an abyss that stared back. This was not just an old alien. This was something that had lived for so long that human civilization was barely a footnote in his memory. "Stand up, boy," Elder Moonho said, his voice carrying an accent that made Hyeon-seek seem almost human.
What?
Has bound himself too. Jue forced himself to stand straighter, though every instinct screamed at him to run. The elder walked closer, moving with fluid steps that made no sound on the metal deck. When he was close enough to touch, he stopped and breathed in deeply. "Human," he said with obvious distaste. "Young, foolish, and weak. Hyeon-seek, explain too. Me how you came to bind yourself to this creature." Before Hyeon-seek could answer, Captain Lee stepped forward. Years of command had taught her never to show weakness, even when facing something that terrified her crew. "I am Captain Soman Lee of the Terran vessel Resilience," she said firmly. "Lieutenant Park is under my protection, and I demand to know what you've done to him." Elder Moonho turned his ancient gaze to her, and Captain Lee felt like an insect. "Being examined by a scientist, you demand?" he said, and there was amusement in his voice that was somehow worse than anger. "You are very bold for such a short-lived species." "We may be short-lived, but we're not defenseless," Captain Lee replied. "And we don't appreciate our people being kidnapped or mystically married without their consent." A sound like distant laughter came from the assembled Nixhari. Elder Moonho's lips curved in what might have been a smile, showing teeth that were definitely fangs. "Kidnapped," he said. "Child, your boy offered himself freely. My descendant merely accepted what was given." "I was flirting," Jae-woo said, finding his voice at last. I had no idea it meant anything serious. Elder Moonho's attention shifted back to him. Ignorance is not an excuse for binding yourself to one of the eldest bloodlines in the galaxy. You have tied your short human life to something far beyond your understanding. Then untie it, Yonji said angrily. If this was all a misunderstanding, just undo whatever you did. The silence that followed her words was broken only by the hum of the station's systems. Elder Moonho studied the humans with an expression that might have been pity. The bond cannot be undone, he said finally. It is written in blood and spirit. Only death can break what has been forged. Captain Lee felt her heart sink. Saying that Lieutenant Park is stuck in this situation forever? Not stuck, Yuna said, speaking for the first time since the Elder's arrival. Honored. No, he is too primitive to understand the gift he has been given. Gift? Jaewoo laughed, but there was no humor in it. I can't even think straight. I feel like I'm being pulled apart. Hyun-sik stepped forward, his face showing genuine concern. The bond is still settling. In time you will adapt. Adapt to what? Captain Lee demanded. What exactly has happened to my officer? Elder Moonho walked in a slow circle around Jaewoo, like a predator examining prey. The bond links their life forces. Your human will gain some of our strengths and longevity. In return, we gain access to his essence, his emotions, his very soul. The way he said it made Jaewoo's skin crawl. That sounds like you're talking about feeding on me. In a sense, yes, Elder Moonho replied with casual honesty. Your species produces emotions and life energy in ways that are intoxicating. To us, the bond allows my descendant to share in that vitality. Yunji's hand moved to her weapon. You're talking about using him as food? The temperature in the docking bay seemed to drop several degrees. The Nixhari straightened, and their eyes began to glow with soft red light. Elder Moonho's smile disappeared. Careful, little soldier, he said softly. Speak of matters beyond your comprehension. I comprehend enough, Captain Lee said, stepping between Young Ji and the aliens. You've turned one of my people into some kind of mystical battery for your descendant. The bond is beneficial to both parties, Hyun-sik said quickly, clearly. Trying to prevent the situation from escalating? Jaewoo will live far longer than any human, gain enhanced abilities, and experience things no member of his species has ever known. In exchange for his freedom, Captain Lee replied coldly. Elder Moonho's patience was clearly wearing thin. A boy belongs to our clan now. His essence is bound to Hyun-sik. Will come with us, and you will not interfere. Like hell he will, Yonji said, her weapon half drawn. The reaction was immediate. Every Nixhari in the docking bay hissed in unison, a sound like steam escaping from a broken pipe. Their fangs extended, and their eyes blazed with red light. The air itself seemed to vibrate with menace. You forget yourself, humans, Elder Moonho said, his voice carrying the promise of violence. We have walked between the stars since before your species learned to make fire. You will show proper respect, or you will learn why younger races fear the dark. Alarms began blaring throughout the station as the Nixhari ships powered up their weapons. On the bridge of the Resilience, Tommen was shouting reports about energy spikes and targeting sensors locking onto their ship. Captain Lee raised her hands slowly, trying to calm the situation before it exploded into violence. Nobody wants a fight here, she said, but we can't just let you take one of our people. You cannot stop us, Elder Moonho replied. Your weapons are primitive, your ships are slow, and your lifespans are barely long enough to matter. If we wished to take the boy by force, you could not prevent it. Jaewoo looked around at the faces surrounding him. His crewmates were frightened, but determined to protect him. The Nixhari were prepared for violence if their demands were not met. And somewhere in the bond he shared with Hyun-sik, he could feel the alien's distress at the conflict his actions had caused. Wait, Jaewoo said, his voice carrying clearly in the tense silence. Everyone just wait a minute. All eyes turned to him. He was pale and shaking, but his voice was steady when he continued. If this bond thing is permanent, and if breaking, it means someone dies, then we need to find another solution. Fighting each other isn't going to help anyone. Elder Moonho looked at him with something that might have been approval. The human shows wisdom beyond his years. What do you propose? Jaewoo looked at Captain Lee, then at Hyun-sik, then at the ancient being who held so many lives in his hands. Give me time to understand what's happening to me. Let me learn about your people and your ways. Maybe we can find a path that doesn't end in violence. And if we cannot, Elder Moonho asked. Jae-woo straightened his shoulders and met. The elders gazed directly. Then I'll make my choice when I have all the facts. But I won't be forced into anything by anyone. The silence stretched for long moments before Elder Moonho nodded slowly. Very well, you have 7 of your days to decide. But know this, young human, the bond will not wait for your understanding. With each passing hour you become more connected to my descendant and less able to survive without him. With that ominous warning, Elder Moonho turned and walked back toward his ship. The other Nixhari followed, but Hyansik hesitated. I am sorry, he said to Jae-woo. I never meant for this to become so complicated. Neither did I, Jae-woo replied. But we're in it now, so we better figure out how to make it work. As the aliens departed, Captain Lee put a hand on Jae-woo's shoulder. 7 days, she said grimly. We better use them wisely. 3 days had passed since Elder Moonho's ultimatum, and Jae-woo was changing in ways that both fascinated and terrified him. He could hear conversations from 3 decks away. His reflexes had become lightning fast, and he no longer needed more than 2 hours of sleep. The most unsettling change was the constant awareness of Hyansik presence aboard the alien ship, Dr. Min-ho Choi. The Resilience's chief medical officer and xenobiologists had been running tests around the clock. His small laboratory was filled with data screens showing readings that made no sense according to human science. Your cellular structure is changing, Dr. Choi explained, pointing to microscopic images on his monitor. The bond is rewriting. Your DNA at the molecular level, you're becoming something new, something that's part human and part Nixhari. Jae-woo stared at the images of his own blood cells. They look different now, darker and more complex. How long do I have before? I'm not human anymore? That's the strange part, Dr. Choi said, rubbing his tired eyes. You're not becoming less human, you're becoming more than human. Your human characteristics are being enhanced rather than replaced. Captain Lee entered the laboratory, followed by Yoon-ji and Communications Officer Taemin. The captain's face showed the strain of 3 sleepless nights, trying to find a diplomatic solution. The Defender arrived an hour ago, she reported. Captain Woojin has been in contact with Earth Command. We're sending a full diplomatic team, but it will take 2 weeks to get here. We don't have 2 weeks, Jae-woo said. Through the bond, he could feel Hyansik's growing restlessness. The alien was struggling against his family's demands to simply take Jae-woo and leave. There's more, Captain Lee continued. I've been researching the Nixhari in our databases. They're mentioned in some very old records, but always as myths or legends. Stories about beautiful pale beings who steal people away in the night. Yoon-ji crossed her arms. Vampires. They're space vampires. And one of them has claimed Jae-woo as his personal blood bank. It's more complex than that, Dr. Choi interjected. The bond doesn't just allow them to feed on human emotions and life energy. It creates a genuine connection between 2 minds. Jae-woo is gaining access to Hyansik's memories and knowledge. This was true. Over the past 3 days, Jae-woo had been experiencing flashes of memories that were not his own. He had seen star systems that humans had never discovered, witnessed technologies that were beyond Earth's current understanding, felt the weight of centuries of Nixhari history. I've been learning about their society, Jae-woo said slowly, and I think I understand why Elder Moonho is so upset about this bond. He moved to the laboratory's main display screen and began calling up the star charts he had memorized from Hyansik's memories. The Nixhari aren't just ancient, he explained. They're dying out. Their birth rate has been declining for thousands of years. They're too proud to adapt, to set in their ways to change with the galaxy around them. The star chart showed a vast region of space that had once been Nixhari territory. Red markers indicated systems that were now empty, their populations gone. They used to control hundreds of star systems, Jae-woo continued. Now they're down to maybe 20, and most of those are barely inhabited. Captain Lee studied the display with growing understanding. So when Hyansik bonded with you, he wasn't just taking a mate. He was bringing foreign influence into a dying culture. Exactly, Jae-woo said. And that's why Yuna and the others are so angry. They see humans as a contamination that will speed up their decline. Taemin looked up from his datapad. But what if they're wrong? What if humans could help them instead of destroying them? The idea hit Jae-woo like lightning. Through the bond, he could access not just Hyeon-Seek's memories, but also his knowledge of Nixhari science and technology. The aliens had incredible mastery over energy manipulation and dimensional physics, but they had stagnated centuries ago. They had become so focused on preserving their ancient ways that they had stopped innovating. That's it, Jae-woo said excitedly. Dr. Choi pulled up the energy readings from their ships. The doctor's fingers flew over his controls, bringing up the scans they had taken of the Nixhari vessels. The energy signatures were unlike anything in human databases, but now Jae-woo could understand what he was seeing. They're using dimensional fold technology for their power systems, he explained, pointing to specific readings. But it's terribly inefficient. They're losing about 60% of their energy to dimensional bleed. Dr. Choi leaned forward, suddenly interested. You can see that from these readings. I can see it because Hyeon-Seek knows it, Jae-woo replied. It's been a problem for their engineers for decades, but they refuse to consider new approaches because the current method is traditional. Captain Lee was beginning to smile. But humans don't care about tradition when it comes to solving problems. Exactly, Jae-woo said. It could help them fix their energy systems, improve their technology, maybe even find solutions to their population decline. But they won't listen to us because they think we're primitive. Yoonji raised an eyebrow. So how do we prove them wrong? Jae-woo was quiet for a moment, accessing more of Hyeon-Seek's memories. There were technical problems the Nixhari had been struggling with for centuries. Challenges they could not solve with their rigid adherence to ancient methods. I need to talk to their engineers, he said finally. Show them what human innovation can do when combined with their knowledge. The Elder will never allow it, Captain Lee pointed out. He made it clear that he considers humans barely worth noticing. And we don't ask the Elder, Jae-woo replied. We ask the younger Nixhari, the ones who are frustrated with watching their civilizations slowly die. Through the bond, he could sense Hyeon-Seek's surprise and growing excitement. The alien had been listening to Jae-woo's thoughts and was beginning to understand the possibilities. 2 hours later, Jae-woo found himself in the docking bay again, but this time the atmosphere was different. Instead of a confrontation, this felt like a scientific conference. Hyeon-Seek had managed to convince several younger Nixhari engineers to attend. Despite Elder Moonho's disapproval, Yuna was there too. Her expression skeptical but curious. Dr. Choi had set up portable displays showing energy efficiency calculations and theoretical improvements to Nixhari technology. Your dimensional fold generators are bleeding energy here. Here and here, Jae-woo explained, pointing to the technical diagrams. The knowledge flowed through him from Hyeon-Seek's memories. But the innovative solutions were purely human. A young Nixhari engineer named Dong-woo stepped forward. His pale face showed excitement despite his attempts to remain dignified. You can see the bleed points? Our masters have been trying to solve this problem for 2 centuries. That's because they're trying to solve it with 2,000-year-old methods, Jae-woo replied. But if you combine your dimensional manipulation with human adaptive engineering, you get this. Dr. Choi activated a holographic display showing a modified generator design. It incorporated Nixhari dimensional technology with human efficiency. Innovations, creating a system that was both familiar and revolutionary. The effect on the alien engineers was immediate. They crowded around the display, talking rapidly in their own language. Even Yuna looked impressed despite herself. This design could increase efficiency by 40%, Dong-woo said in amazement. How did you develop this so quickly? Because humans don't get stuck on doing things the way they've always been done, Jae-woo explained. We adapt, we improvise. We try new approaches when old ones don't work. Another engineer, an older female named Sujin, shook her head in wonder. In 3 days, you have achieved what our greatest minds could not accomplish in decades. Not me, Jae-woo corrected. Us. Human creativity combined with Nixhari knowledge. Neither of our species could have done this alone. Hyeon-Seek stepped forward, his face glowing with pride and affection. This is what I tried to tell the Elder. The bond does not weaken us. It makes us stronger. Yuna was studying the technical displays with growing excitement. Brother, if this human is correct, we could solve not just the energy problem, but dozens of other issues that have plagued our people. Our populations are declining because we refuse to change, Sujin added. But perhaps change is not the enemy we thought it was. The sound of heavy footsteps interrupted their discussion. Elder Moonho had arrived, flanked by several ancient Nixari whose expressions ranged from disapproval to outright anger. What is the meaning of this gathering? The elder demanded. I gave specific orders that there would be no fraternization. With these humans, Dongwu stepped forward bravely. Elder, you must see what they have accomplished. They have solved the dimensional bleed problem that has troubled our engineers for generations. Elder Moonho's ancient eyes swept over the technical displays with obvious disdain. Tricks and illusions. Human technology is primitive compared to our mastery. With respect, Elder, Yuna said carefully, perhaps our mastery has become too rigid. This human has shown us possibilities we never considered. Because those possibilities go against everything our ancestors built. Elder Moonho replied coldly, we are Nixari. We do not need the help of short-lived creatures who barely understand the forces they play with. J. 6 months had passed since the 7-day ultimatum. The trade station had become something unprecedented in galactic history. What had once been a simple meeting point for merchants was now a thriving research center where humans and Nixari worked side by side on projects that neither species could have imagined alone. Jae-woo stood in the central laboratory, watching as Dr. Minho Choi and the Nixari engineer Sujin calibrated their latest creation. The dimensional energy harvester was beautiful to look at, its crystalline core pulsing with soft blue light that seemed to bend space around it. More importantly, it was producing energy at 97% efficiency, something that would have been impossible without combining human adaptability with Nixari knowledge of dimensional physics. The bond between Jae-woo and Hyeon-sik had evolved far beyond what either had expected. What had begun as an accidental mystical connection had grown into a true partnership of minds. They could share thoughts and emotions at will, but more importantly, they had learned to blend their different ways of thinking into something entirely new. Jae-woo was no longer quite human, but he had not lost his humanity. The Nixari enhancements had given him their longevity and physical abilities, but his human creativity and emotional range had remained intact. If anything, connection to Hyeon-sik's ancient memories had made him more aware of what made humans special in the galaxy. Hyeon-sik entered the laboratory, moving with his characteristic silent grace. Even after all these months, his pale beauty still made people stop and stare, but now it was with admiration rather than fear. He had learned to smile more often, and his fangs no longer seemed quite so threatening. The council meeting went well, he reported to Jae-woo. 5 more Nixari clans have agreed to participate in the cultural exchange program. And the humans? Jae-woo asked, though he could already sense the answer through their bond. Captain Woo Jin received approval for 3 more research stations. Earth Command is finally beginning to understand the benefits of our partnership. It had not been easy to reach this point. The first few months had been filled with suspicion and misunderstandings from both sides. Many humans saw the Nixari as dangerous predators, while many Nixari viewed humans as primitive upstarts who threatened their ancient traditions. But the results spoke for themselves. Human engineers working with Nixari masters had developed technologies that revolutionized space travel. Nixari artists collaborating with human creators had produced works of beauty that neither species could have achieved alone. Most importantly, young Nixari exposed to human culture were beginning to form romantic relationships and have children for the first time in centuries. Yoon-ah had been one of the most surprising converts. Hyeon-sik's sister had initially opposed the bond with every fiber of her being, but 6 months of working alongside humans had changed her perspective completely. She had become the leader of a group of young Nixari who were eager to learn human customs and ways of thinking. Brother, she said as she entered the laboratory, the new students have arrived from Earth. They are eager to begin their studies. The cultural exchange program had grown beyond anyone's expectations. human students came to learn Nixhari dimensional science and philosophy, while young Nixhari traveled to Earth to study human innovation and creativity. The program had a waiting list that stretched for years, but not everyone was happy with these developments. Jae-woo could sense tension building among certain factions on both sides. Some humans wanted to exploit Nixhari technology for military purposes, while some Nixhari traditionalists saw the growing influence of human culture as a threat to their very existence. Dr. Choi looked up from his instruments with excitement. The harvester is running at optimal levels. Sujin, your modifications to the dimensional matrix have eliminated the last traces of energy bleed. The elderly Nixhari engineer smiled, an expression that would have been impossible for her people before their exposure to human emotion. When your adaptive stabilizers have solved resonance problems we have struggled with for millennia, Dr. Choi Jae-woo felt a surge of pride through his bond with Hyeon-sik. These small victories were proof that their relationship was more than just a mystical accident. It was the foundation for something that could change the galaxy. But his contentment was interrupted by alarms blaring throughout the station. Captain Lee's voice echoed through the communication system. All personnel to emergency stations. We have unidentified vessels approaching at high speed. Through the laboratory's viewports, Jae-woo could see ships emerging from hyperspace. Some were sleek human military vessels, while others were dark Nixhari warships that he did not recognize. Both groups moved with hostile intent, converging on the peaceful research station like predators surrounding prey. Hyeon-sik's face went pale, which was impressive considering his natural complexion. "Those are Elder Kwangsu's ships," he said, with growing alarm. "Moonho's brother has always opposed our alliance, and those human ships belong to Admiral Dong Hyun-yang," Dr. Choi added grimly. "He has been pushing Earth Command to weaponize our research." Jae-woo felt his stomach drop as he realized what was happening. The extremists on both sides had decided to act simultaneously, probably hoping to destroy the cultural exchange program before it could spread further. Within minutes, the station's docking bays were filled with armed soldiers from both species. Admiral Yang was a stern man in his 50s with the kind of military bearing that suggested he had never backed down from a fight. He strode into the main laboratory, flanked by armed Marines, his cold eyes taking in the mixed human Nixhari. "Research teams with obvious disapproval. Dr. Choi," he said curtly, "by order of Earth Command Defense Division, its research is being classified and placed under military control. All Nixhari personnel are to be detained for questioning." Simultaneously, Elder Kwangsu entered from the opposite entrance. He was nearly as ancient as Moonho, but carried himself with the rigid posture of someone who had never allowed change or compromise into his worldview. His followers moved with predatory grace, their eyes glowing red with barely contained aggression. "Humans will cease contaminating our people with their primitive influences," Elder Kwangsu declared in accented universal standard. "All bonds will be severed, and our youth will return to proper Nixhari traditions." The two groups of extremists faced each other across the laboratory, with the mixed research teams caught in the middle. Jae-woo could feel Hyeon-sik's fear and anger through their bond, but also his determination to protect what they had built together. Captain Lee arrived with her security team, but they were vastly outnumbered by the combined forces of both factions. "Admiral Yang," she said formally, "this station operates under diplomatic immunity. You have no authority here. Diplomatic immunity is suspended in cases of security threats," Admiral Yang replied coldly. "These aliens have been using mystical bonds to influence human minds. That makes them enemy combatants." Elder Kwangsu's fangs extended as he heard the word enemy. "You dare call us enemies, short-lived creature? We have walked between stars since before your species discovered fire. And yet you need our help to keep your civilization from dying," Admiral Yang shot back. "That makes you weak, not superior." The tension in the room was becoming unbearable. Jae-woo could see fingers moving toward weapons on both sides. In moments, the laboratory would become a battlefield and everything they had worked to build would be destroyed. But then, Sujin did something unexpected. The elderly Nixhari engineer stepped forward and placed herself between the two armed groups. "Stop," she said firmly. "All of you, stop and look around." She gestured to the dimensional energy harvester, still pulsing with its beautiful blue light. 6 months ago, this was impossible. Our people had struggled with dimensional bleed for centuries, but we were too proud to seek help. Your people had the creativity to solve the problem, but lacked the knowledge to understand the forces involved. Dr. Choi joined her in the middle of the room. Together, we achieved something neither species could accomplish alone. But separately, we remain limited by our own perspectives. Yuna stepped forward as well, her young face showing determination. I have learned more about innovation and adaptation in these past months than in my previous century of existence. The humans have not contaminated our culture. They have helped it grow. One by one, other researchers from both species moved to stand with them. Human students stood beside their Nixhari teachers. Nixhari engineers linked arms with their human colleagues. Even some of the younger soldiers on both sides looked uncertain about their orders. Jae-woo felt Hyeon-sik's hand slip into his own. The bond between them pulsed with shared resolve. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Admiral Yang, Elder Kwang-soo, Jae-woo, said, his voice carrying clearly through the tense silence. You see cooperation as weakness or contamination? But what if you're both wrong? What if working together makes us stronger than either species? Could be alone? Admiral Yang's expression remained stern. Pretty words won't change the fact that these aliens have compromised your mind, Lieutenant. And human influence has corrupted our youth beyond redemption, Elder Kwang-soo added coldly. The laboratory fell silent, except for the soft humming of the dimensional energy harvester. Weapons were drawn on both sides, and Jae-woo could feel the moment balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong word, one sudden movement, and the peaceful research station would become a battlefield. But then he felt something remarkable through his bond with Hyeon-sik. Not just their usual connection, but something deeper. The months of working together, of sharing thoughts and emotions, had created pathways between their minds that neither had fully understood until now. Through Hyeon-sik's ancient memories, Jae-woo could access centuries of Nixhari knowledge about dimensional physics. Through Jae-woo's human perspective, Hyeon-sik could see innovative solutions that his people had never considered. But now, in this moment of crisis, their bond was showing them something neither species had ever achieved alone. Admiral Yang. Elder Kwang-soo Jae-woo said, stepping forward with Hyeon-sik beside him. You want proof that our alliance is beneficial instead of dangerous? Let us show you. More tricks and illusions, Admiral Yang said dismissively, but his grip on his weapon tightened. The human speaks of things beyond his understanding, Elder Kwang-soo added, his red eyes glowing with menace. Jae-woo and Hyeon-sik exchanged a look that conveyed volumes. What they were about to attempt was theoretically possible according to Nixhari science, but no one had ever actually done it successfully. The risks were enormous, and failure could destroy not just them but the entire station. Dr. Choi called to the human scientist. Bring up the dimensional fold calculations we were working on last week. Jae-woo, what are you planning? Dr. Choi asked with concern, but he activated the holographic displays anyway. Complex mathematical equations filled the air above their heads, showing theoretical models for stable wormhole generation. It was research that both species had pursued, separately, for decades, without success. The energy requirements were too massive, the dimensional stresses too unpredictable. So Jin's eyes widened as she realized what Jae-woo was suggesting. The unified field theory? But the power requirements alone would destroy any ship attempting it. Not if we combine human adaptive engineering with Nixhari dimensional mastery, Hyeon-sik said, his voice carrying new confidence. Not if we work as one mind instead of two separate entities. Through their bond, they began sharing calculations and theoretical frameworks faster than any computer could process. Jae-woo's human creativity suggested modifications that overcame traditional limitations. Hyeon-sik's ancient knowledge provided the dimensional manipulation techniques needed to make those modifications work. The research teams around them watched in amazement as the two bonded beings began working with a speed and precision that seemed impossible. Their hands moved over control panels in perfect synchronization, adjusting energy flows and dimensional Parameters with the kind of intuitive understanding that came from sharing a single enhanced consciousness. They are moving too fast, one of Admiral Yang's Marines whispered. How can they calculate so quickly? Because they are not calculating separately, Yuna said with growing excitement. They are thinking as one being with the combined knowledge of both species. The dimensional energy harvester began to pulse with increasing intensity as Jae-woo and Hyeon-sik fed it new power configurations. The blue light grew brighter and started to take on other colors, cycling through the spectrum in patterns that hurt to look at directly. This is madness, Elder Kwangsu declared. No one has ever successfully generated a stable wormhole. The dimensional stresses will tear this station apart. Only when attempted by a single species working alone, Hyeon-sik replied without looking away from his controls. But we are no longer working alone. The air in the laboratory began to shimmer and distort. Space itself seemed to be bending around the energy harvester, creating ripples that spread outward in ever-widening circles. Several of the armed soldiers took nervous steps backward as reality warped around them. Captain Lee activated her emergency communicator. All stations prepare for possible dimensional anomaly. Evacuate non-essential personnel to minimum safe distance. But Jae-woo could feel through the bond that the process was stable, even though it defied everything that conventional science said was possible. The combination of human adaptability and Nixhari dimensional mastery was creating something entirely new. The resonance frequencies are holding steady, Dr. Choi reported in amazement. The dimensional matrix is not collapsing. How is this possible? Because we are not just using our technologies together, Jae-woo explained, his voice strangely calm despite the cosmic forces swirling around them. We are becoming something new, something greater than either species alone. The energy harvester reached critical resonance, and suddenly, the space above it tore open like fabric being ripped apart. But instead of the violent dimensional collapse that everyone expected, a perfect sphere of absolute darkness appeared, rimmed with swirling colors that spoke of distances beyond measurement. A stable wormhole, first one ever created by sentient beings. The laboratory fell silent, except for the soft singing of dimensional energies in perfect harmony. Through the opening, they could see stars that were thousands of light years away, stellar formations that would take decades to reach with conventional faster-than-light travel. Admiral Yang lowered his weapon, his face showing shock and wonder. That's impossible. The energy requirements alone should have overloaded every system on the station. It's impossible for humans working alone, Jae-woo agreed. Impossible for Nixhari working alone. Not impossible for both species working as partners. Elder Kwang-soo stared at the wormhole with expressions cycling between awe and disbelief. In all my centuries of existence, I have never seen anything like this. Neither have we, Sujin said softly. This achievement surpasses anything either of our species has accomplished in recorded history. The implications were staggering. Stable wormholes would revolutionize galactic travel and commerce. Distant star systems could be connected instantly, eliminating the barriers that had kept alien species isolated from each other. The galaxy would become a smaller, more connected place. But more importantly, the success proved beyond any doubt that human-Nixhari cooperation was not just beneficial, but revolutionary. Yoon-Ah stepped forward, her young face glowing with excitement. Brother, what you and Jae-woo have achieved today will be remembered for millennia. You have shown us that our future lies not in isolation, but in connection. Dr. Choi was taking readings frantically, his instruments barely able to process the exotic energies flowing through the wormhole. The dimensional stability is perfect. Energy drain is minimal. This technology could change everything. One by one, the weapons on both sides were lowered. Even the most dedicated extremists could not deny what they were seeing. The wormhole hung in the air like a doorway to infinity, proof that cooperation between species could achieve miracles. Admiral Yang holstered his sidearm with obvious reluctance. I came here expecting to find security threats and compromised personnel. Instead, I find the greatest technological breakthrough in human history. And I came expecting to find contamination and corruption, Elder Kwang-soo admitted, his ancient voice carrying new humility. Instead, I find evolution and transcendence. The moment began to fade. Creating the wormhole had required more energy than he had known he possessed, drawing on reserves enhanced by his bond with hide-and-seek. But through that bond he also felt profound satisfaction and hope. What had begun as an accidental flirtation in a trade station had grown into something that would reshape galactic civilization. The wormhole will only remain stable for a few more minutes, hide-and-seek said, monitoring the energy readings. Now that we know the process works, we can refine it and make it permanent. Elder Moonho appeared in the laboratory entrance, having arrived just in time to witness the miracle. The ancient leader's face showed emotions that Jay-Woo had never seen there before. Wonder, pride, and something that might have been hope. "My descendants," he said formally, "you have achieved something that will be spoken of as long as our species survives. Perhaps our survival is now assured." Captain Lee stepped forward, her expression showing the kind of awe reserved for witnessing history being made. "Lieutenant Park, what you and hide-and-seek have accomplished today will be studied and celebrated for generations. You've proven that the bond between your species is not a liability, but humanity's greatest asset." As the wormhole slowly collapsed back into normal space, leaving only the memory of impossible distances bridged, Jay-Woo reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, he had been a simple trader who thought he was clever enough to embarrass an intimidating alien with some harmless flirtation. He had never imagined that his casual attempt at humor would bind him to someone whose people had walked between stars since before humanity learned to make fire.t. But the bond that had once seemed like a trap had become the key to something greater than either species could have achieved alone. Other alien civilizations were already requesting similar partnerships with humans, recognizing that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or military might, but their ability to adapt, connect, and transform everything they touched. "So what happens now?" Yoonji asked, speaking for the first time since the crisis had begun. Jay-Woo looked at hide-and-seek, their bond humming with shared contentment and anticipation for the future. "We keep proving that cooperation is stronger than fear and that the universe is big enough for all of us to thrive together." Elder Kwang-Soo approached them slowly, his ancient pride warring with newfound respect. "Human," he said formally, "I owe you an apology. I believed your species would destroy what we had built. Instead, you have shown us how to build something greater. We've shown each other," Jay-Woo corrected gently. "That's what partnership means." As the various factions began to disperse and the immediate crisis passed, Jay-Woo found himself thinking about all the other accidental encounters that might be happening throughout the galaxy. How many other species were meeting for the first time? How many other bonds were being formed between beings who never expected to find common ground? The trade station returned to its normal rhythms, but everything had changed. The successful wormhole demonstration had proven that the future belonged not to any single species, but to all of them working together. Jay-Woo smiled as he remembered his impulsive decision to flirt with a dangerous-looking alien 6 months ago. Sometimes he reflected the most important moments in history began with the smallest and most unexpected gestures. The bond that had started as an accident had become the foundation for a new age of galactic cooperation. And somewhere among the stars, other accidental encounters were happening, creating connections that would continue to reshape the universe in ways no one could predict. The galaxy was becoming a smaller, more connected place, one bond at a time.